In today's video, we're going to learn how to set up a SharePoint list to control permissions inside of an app. In this case, we're going to use an admin column to decide what admins can do in the system versus everybody else. Now, if we go to our SharePoint portal here and we view existing intakes, as an admin, what you see in here is the ability to manage your permissions. So we can come in here and we can add more people, or we can cancel, or we can edit the people that are already in here, and we can save those adjustments. Or we can go back to our home screen here, and as an admin, I'm going to see everything. So I'm going to see all of the requests in here, and I'll be able to click on these, and I can actually adjust the status or any of the columns or fields that are inside of this intake request, save them, or we can hit cancel, or we can hit the back button to return to the screen here. Again, in this video, we're going to set up how this all works. So now we've completely eliminated the need to go to the SharePoint list. Even as an admin, all we have to use is our application to do everything for maintaining the project requests that are submitted in the system. Now, if this is the first time to my channel, this is actually the third video in the series on this particular app. So if you want to check out the first video where I explain how you can set this up inside of a form approach where the user clicks a link and it opens up the form associated with the SharePoint list, and we kind of go through the design of the actual intake form in that video, check that link out here. The second video, I talk about all the different options, and I think there was 3, maybe 4 different options I covered in that video that explain different ways you can approach the users going back in there to see their different forms, whether it's through a Power Automate email, and I explain how to set that up also, or if it's coming into the actual app design. And in that particular video, we create this landing page, but it's filtered down to only the user. So if you want to see that video, which is kind of the step 2 in this process, click this link here in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and that'll take you to that video. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing we need to do is create another SharePoint list. Let's go into our site contents here, and then we'll create a list, and we'll just do a standard list. And for the list, we're going to go ahead and call it project intake, and we'll uncheck this. I don't typically like everything showing up in my navigation over here, so let's hit the create button. All right, let's go ahead and add a column. And for this one, it's going to be a person column. Hit next, and we'll title this user. And let's go ahead and show profiles. It doesn't really matter, but if you are going to manage this here versus inside of the app, I usually like the profiles to be visible if we're going to use this. Let's go ahead and hit save, and then let's add another column, and this will be a yes/no column. And this will be our first permission, so we'll say admin. And obviously we want the default to be no in this case. In case you add other permissions in here, you always want to set the admin to no. So you can set something like view only as default of yes, potentially, or there might be some other permissions that you could set as yes as a default there, but for the most part, you want everything to be no. Let's go ahead and hit the save button here. Now for the title field, a lot of times what I like to do is use the title field as a text field of the user, and it could be email or it could be the name. It gives you a shadow column to use if you need to do any kind of filtering that presents challenges as far as delegation issues. Text fields are great, so just keep that there. You might use this, and I'll show you a trick for how to use this within the app also. All right, now that we've got our project intake permissions done, let's go to our app. All right, so in our app, what we need to do is add the data source that we created. So let's go ahead and add data. And then we're going to refresh this to make sure it's got the current information. And then we're going to find SharePoint. And I'll find our connection here. And then we'll find here. And then we'll pick our list. And it's project intake permissions and hit connect. All right, so now we've got access to our data. Let's go ahead and look at our tree view here. And let's go ahead and just duplicate this page. And I'll go ahead and move this down. Now this is going to be our permissions page. So we'll go ahead and just call it access permissions, and we'll call it a center. And then let's go ahead and change the name here. So we'll call this access permissions. And then let's go ahead and select our gallery here. And we'll go ahead and change our gallery So we're not looking at this anymore. We'll find our project intake permissions, and we'll just go ahead and copy that and replace everything for right now. And let's go find this. And this would be our user.display name. And then we'll change the title here. So this is going to be our user name. And we'll say this is admin. And then we'll select this one and we'll delete it. And we'll select this one and we'll delete. And so we've got that. Let's go ahead and move this selection back to the other side so it's out of our way. All right, so we've got our name. And this one also changed locations. Sometimes when you copy and paste, that happens. All right, so we'll go ahead and change this one to admin. We'll go ahead and change our size here. So let's delete this one. We don't need this. And then I'm going to show you a little trick here to keep everything aligned. Let's go ahead and change these things. So this is our label admin, label username, and this is going to be our text username, and this is going to be our text admin. And we'll get rid of this. All right, so now we've got everything kind of where it needs to be. Now let's go ahead and adjust this. So our X for this one is going to be label username.x. And then we'll just copy that to make it a little bit easier. And then we want our width to be the same. That way it's the same width. Then we come over here to our text admin and we do essentially the same thing. So now we've got label admin.x. We copy that again. And then we'll change our width to match this. All right, so now everything's going to be aligned. So if we change this one, say we make the width 250, it's automatically going to adjust everything that's inside of our gallery, which is incredibly helpful. Now all we have to do is, I think we're going to add a toggle. I tend to like toggles. I think they look a little bit better. So we'll go ahead and add this toggle in here. And for our checked, we'll just say this item dot admin. And for our label, let's go ahead and adjust our label for this as well. For that, we're going to say if this item dot admin equals true, then yes. Otherwise, we want no. And we'll close it off. And we've got our toggles now. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of our text box for this. And then we'll keep everything ordered over here. And let's go ahead and just move this up a little bit. All right, so now we're kind of aligned a little bit better here. All right, I went ahead and renamed all of our controls in here. So now it's a little more appropriately aligned with the page we're working on. Now, there are two different ways we can do updates here. We can use editable grid, and those work great. They can have some issues with how galleries are built to refresh. So you can have problems limiting it to only refresh the items that you're actually changing. And per Microsoft, it's designed with how the galleries actually work and how they trigger refreshes. So there's actually some functionality in a gallery that can be kind of hard to work around. So you can run into some strange behaviors. And when you're talking about potentially thousands of records, you want to be careful when you're using a editable grid for doing updates. There are workarounds for everything, but my preference has been to just use a form control, especially for something like access permissions. It's a little bit less likely to have any kind of a error or making changes to users unintentionally by clicking the wrong buttons, especially if you're using toggle buttons. So I tend to think that the safer approach is to use a form control for this. But we're gonna have to redesign how our page is set up here to do that. So right now we're in a vertical grid. I typically like to use a horizontal grid when we're doing this. So basically we want all of these controls in a container, and we want a horizontal container. So we have our options over here. So we're gonna have to add some additional options here. So let's go ahead and select this, and we're gonna go ahead and insert a container. And this one is going to be a vertical container. And we're gonna go ahead and cut this. and put this into here. And then we'll just drag these in here. All right, that looks good. Then we're just going to rename this to our access permissions main container. And this one will be our actual gallery control. All right, now for this one, we can go ahead and change this to a horizontal container. And then we'll go insert a vertical container. All right, so now we've got our form area. And we're going to have controls. So let's go ahead and add another container in here. And that'll be a horizontal container for the top. And then we'll go ahead and add a container for our form also. And then again, it'll be a vertical container. And for this one, let's go ahead and set its height to 42. This will be where we're going to put our buttons in here. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of these drop shadows. We don't need all the drop shadows in here. And let's see here. Okay, so we've got this one. We'll go ahead and add our form control here. And again, this is going to be for our intake permissions. We don't need the content type, so let's delete that out of there. And for our title, let's go ahead and unlock this. Let's go ahead and change this. We'll go ahead and unlock right away. And let's go ahead and change this one to select user. Then we're going to have to adjust our items property for this so that we can go beyond 500 items. So let's go ahead and change this to self.search text. All right, let's go ahead and add a button here. And we'll go ahead and put the buttons on the right side. And we'll center them. And we'll go ahead and put a little bit of a gap here. So we'll put some padding on the right of 20. And let's go ahead and change the name of this. And we'll say save. And then we'll use the save icon here. I like that. That looks pretty good. All right, let's go ahead and change the name of our form. And we'll say access permissions. And we'll go ahead and change the on select. And we'll go ahead and change this to submit form, access permissions. And let's go ahead and copy this button. We want to have a little bit of a gap here. So we're going to put a gap of 20 between them. Yeah, that's probably fine. And let's change this button to cancel. And then we'll look for dismiss. And then for our cancel, what we want to do is reset form. And then it'll basically reset it, whatever we were doing or whatever we wanted to change, it'll reset that back there. Now let's go ahead and make a couple of adjustments here. So we've got our form on success. Let's go ahead and put a notification in here. So we'll say notify successfully saved. And we'll do a notification type of success. And I usually just put it for about a second. 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So just, if you want to make it longer, just increase it by 2 or 3, and then you've got 3 seconds. A lot of people like using 3 seconds. I tend to think 1 second's fine. By then they've seen it if they wanted to look for it. So that'll show up when they hit the save button here and it successfully saves. And let's go ahead and rearrange this. Now we are going to make that title not visible shortly, but I still like to put them at the bottom. Anything that's not visible, as my default is I always put it at the bottom. And let's go ahead and change our settings here. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. And for this, we'll just do parent.width. And we don't need this container to be as big as it is. So let's go ahead and set our minimum width to 1. And then we'll do the same thing for this one. And then for our container, we'll go ahead and change our flexible width. And probably, let's do 400 for this. That's plenty of room for the container there. Actually, we could probably go a little bit less. Let's do 300. So that's about enough space for this. Now you can see they cut it off right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at our containers here. So we've got our form as a minimum width of 400. So this is where setting these things to a smaller number. 1 is usually sufficient. It's never going to get down to 1. If you wanted to ensure that it was at least this, you could also just set it to be this width, and that would be your minimum width. If you never wanted to go less than this, you could do that also. And just for consistency, we'll do the same thing here with parent.width. Even though it's not going to be visible, there are times we might troubleshoot it and you are going to make it visible. At least then it'll take up the entire space here. All right, let's fix our button. So our button is in the wrong place here. Let's go ahead and change its X. And we're going to do parent.width minus self.width. And then we're going to give a little bit of buffer of 20. So that'll be always inset a little bit from the border here. All right, that looks a little bit better. And we want to adjust what happens when we select. So this is because we copied and pasted it. It's got something in there. Let's go ahead and back that out of there. And what we're going to want to do is do a local variable. It looks like I got a spelling error here. Let's fix that. And we're going to say local user selected permissions. And we'll do this item. All right. And let's go ahead and copy this. And this is what we want our forms item property to be set to. So we'll paste that in there. So when we select this, this is going to display that information. All right, let's go ahead and make a couple of other adjustments now. Now this gallery we're using in our previous setup, the setup for that one's a little bit different. We're going to go ahead and change some things here. When I'm using a form with this, in the way that this type of a setup is, where we've actually got information here that's not just a table that we created for the process, I generally go with a little bit different approach for these. Let's go to our template fill here. So we can actually use a different approach for this, and we'll just say this item.id is equal to our local user permissions.id, and that'll be our selection for this instead. And let's go ahead and just copy this, because we can reuse this in other areas, because we also have that same process here for our font weight. So if we come over here, we can actually use the same approach here. And then we can use the same approach here for our font weight. And we actually didn't set this up at all. So we'll just copy this one and paste that over. All right, that's looking good. Let's take a look at our on success again. I think I forgot to do one thing. So let's go ahead and add this. So after we've successfully saved, we want to keep it in edit form. So let's go ahead and set edit form, form access permissions. All right, so that'll keep this in edit mode after we've hit save. And then let's add one more thing here. And we want to use the variable that we just created. So we'll update context. And let's do our variable. And what we want to do is set it to self.lastSubmit. All right, there we go. Everything's looking good there. So our on success, I think, is looking pretty good. And we want to do something similar here. We want to do edit form. Make sure that it's always going to be in edit form when we select this button here. And what we need is a add button. Now, in the case of the add button, we're actually going to put it right here. So we're going to make this container a little bit taller just so we can match our container on the right. So we're going to go with 42 for this one. And then we're going to go ahead and put everything towards the bottom. And then we're going to go ahead and add a container. And this will be a horizontal container. And for this one, we're going to set our height to a minimum of 42, because that's essentially as big as it's going to get. And then we're going to change this to none. And then we're going to add an icon for this one. So we'll do an add icon. And for our width, we'll just say parent.height. We'll copy that. And then we'll do the same thing for our height. So it's always going to be 42. And then we're going to go ahead and shift everything to the right in this one. And we're going to go ahead and select our icon again here. Let's go ahead and turn the border style to none. And let's go ahead with 8 here. And that should be roughly the same size as to our button inside of our gallery here. All right, let's go ahead and set our onSelect for this add button. And we're going to use our context variable again. So we'll do update context. And we want to make sure it's blank. We're basically clearing out the variable to make sure that we don't have any conflicts here with what's being displayed. And then let's go ahead and new form. It'll be our form. Close that off. So when we hit this button, that should set our form to new so we can add something new. And if we hit the cancel, it'll reset the form. Now what we want to do for the reset is we actually want to hide, and we're going to have to add this to our other button as well, but we're going to create a new variable. And this one's going to be local form visible. And for this, we're going to say false. And we'll go ahead and copy this because we're going to need this on our add button also. So we'll add that here. This time we're going to say true. And then in the onVisible of our page, we're also going to add it in here. And it's going to set to false at the beginning when you first load up the page. Now I'm going to go through and rename all this. All right, there now we've got everything renamed. And I also updated accessibility labels and tool tips when appropriate. Let's go ahead and try this out and see what other things we have to make changes to. So let's hit the play button here. And we'll go ahead and hit add and find myself. Now we forgot to change something here. So let's go ahead and make an edit here. So when we select this, we have to go through and edit our fields and add our display name in here. So let's go ahead and play again. And there we go. And for this, we're going to say admin, but I just remembered we haven't adjusted the title field. So let's go ahead and back out of here. And we have to do our update variable here. So we don't want to use this because it's blank and we don't want to have to require the person to type it in there. So we want to use this field here. So if we select this, that is data card value 2. So let's just copy that to make it easy. And we're going to replace, well, actually we just put 2 there. So now what we're going to do is change this to selected dot display name. And now whatever selected here, the display name is going to be saved here. And now that I think about it, I think we actually forgot one other thing here. In our form, we don't want this to be visible all the time. We want to use our form visibility. So let's do that. And also, I think we forgot to put that here. So we didn't really finish all the update context. So local form visible, and we want to make it true. So when we select this, it's going to open up our form control. Let's go ahead and hit the add button here. And I think on our cancel, we need to add one other variable. So let's do that quick before we do our test. So we're going to go ahead and update context, and we're going to do the other variable this time. And we're going to make it blank. All right. So when we hit cancel, we don't make this visible, but we also want to not select anything. So we're going to set this as blank. That way when we hit this cancel button here, we're going to get that effect. And actually, now that I see that, our form, we have to change the border. So let's change that quick too. Not a big fan of the borders on these things. And our form has one also. So let's change that right away while we're at it. All right, now I think we're ready to do a test. Let's go ahead and hit the test button here. Let's cancel. Let's add. So everything's working. Oh, you know what we might want to do is make these fields required. So let's go ahead and do a requirement here for this field. So we'll go ahead and make this a required field. There we go. That way, if somebody tries to save and it's blank, it won't save. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, now we're ready to do a test. So let's go ahead and find us. All right, and that worked. And we'll select admin and hit save. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to see happen is our title has been populated with our name. And then we've got our admin VS and our display name. Let's go ahead and cancel and test this out. So it unselected this. If we select this again, it'll display the information. If we hit the cancel or if we hit the add button, or if we select something and then hit the add button, it'll reset everything. Let's go ahead and add a couple more. So we'll do Amara this time and we'll hit save. Oh, it didn't save. Let's go that. So our required field worked. Let's go ahead and hit save button here. And we've got Amara James. it's the one that we just added and it kept it as selected. So all of our functionality appears to be working as expected. Let's go ahead and add another user here. And we'll do James Carson. Again, all these names are fictitious. I just kind of threw them in there to kind of fill it up, but let's go ahead and hit the save button here. All right, that's working. Now we might want to do is adjust our sort here. So let's go ahead and change our gallery sort. And we'll just sort by the title column. And we'll do sort order ascending. And there we go. Now we've got it in alphabetical order. All right, now we need a way to get back to our main page. So we need to add a button up here for going back. And right now we've got this container as a horizontal container. Let's go ahead and insert another container. And this one will be fine as a horizontal container. Our logo here is 100 by 100. And our header, let's go with flexible width on this one. That way we've got our container on here. Let's go ahead and add a home button, the classic icon here. And we're going to go ahead and put this over on the right side, and we'll put it in the middle. And for this one, that size matches up pretty good with the size of our text there. But let's go ahead and stop using our flexible width for this. And for this, we'll go ahead and make it 65. And let's change this to none. Again, we don't want to have any borders here. Now, this is 100 and this is 65. So what we could actually do is just make this the same. So we'll go with 100. And the effect is that this is actually now more centered than it was before doing it this way. So let's go ahead and preview this. Actually, I think we should put this off a little bit off from the side there. So let's go ahead and adjust this a little. And let's go put the right padding at 20 and see how that looks. Yeah, that's pretty good. That looks pretty good. All right, so for this, let's go ahead for our onSelect and we'll just say back. And now we've got a way to get back to the previous page, but we have to have a way to get here. So let's go back to our main screen here. And we're gonna do kind of the same thing up here. So let's go ahead and select our header here and we'll insert a container. And again, that'll be a horizontal container right here. And let's go ahead and adjust this so that it's flexible again. And then we'll select this and we'll go ahead and call this header container buttons. And let's go ahead and add our home button on here again. And again, we'll put this over on the right in the center. And then we'll go ahead and adjust this to 100 and turn off our shadow. Set that to none. And then we'll put our padding again at 20. Now we've got essentially the same thing. Well, instead of the home button though, in this case, we want to go to user. So we'll look at a user icon like that. So now we've got an add user icon. And let's go ahead and adjust our border solid. I don't like that. And I'll have to do that on the other one also here. Now, when we click this button, we want to have the onSelect here navigate us to our access permission center. And we'll go ahead and do a fade. All right, so let's go ahead and try that. And there we go. And let's go ahead and fix this border right away while I'm thinking about it. Now we can go back and forth between our pages. Now, we don't want everybody to see this. So what we're going to do is come up to our app here, and we're going to go to our OnStart. All right, now what we want to do is first we'll start off with an if error just to be safe. We're going to go ahead and set a global variable, so GBL, and we're going to say role, and then we're going to go ahead and put a comma. And then we're going to do first. And from there, we're going to go ahead and filter our permissions. And what are we going to filter specifically? We're going to go ahead and filter our user.email is equal to our GBL user email. And let's go ahead and close out our filter. And our first, because we're just looking for, again, the first, in case there's more than one in there, We want to make sure that we're getting the first one. And then we're going to go ahead and close out our set function. And then we're going to do a comma for our if error. And here we're going to set our GBL rule blank. And we're going to close out our if error and set up for the next thing. So what did we do here? Our if error basically sets the role to blank at that point if there's some sort of an error. And all we're doing is setting our role as this person. So we're doing a filter. It's kind of like we're filtering down to the specific person that we're looking for and setting that as GBL role. Now what we want to do is set our is user admin question up based off of the role that we just created. So we'll do a class again. And in this case, we're going to do our GBL role.admin. And essentially this is true, is what we're looking for. And if it's not true, then we want false. And we go ahead and close up both of our functions and we're set up for the next one. So essentially we're getting the row information here, and then we're just checking the row to see if admin is true. And if it's not, then it's false. And how this works is if you had multiple roles, you would just do this repeatedly for each one. And you're only going to be pulling the record one time, doing it this way. And then you're just doing a comparison to the record that you just pulled. So you're not constantly going back to SharePoint 15, 20 different times to figure out different roles, depending on how many roles you might have in your tool. Now, how do we test this? Let's go ahead and run our OnStart here. And what we should be able to do is if we insert a text field here, we'll move this over here. We'll say is user admin. And it's true because I added my information in there when we're adding people into the role. So I can now set is user admin based off of this information. So how do we use this information? All right, let's go ahead and go back here. And we're going to set the visibility for this to is that user admin. And now only the admins are going to be able to see this button here. Anybody else that comes into this tool is not going to see this. Now, what else could you do with this? You could come over here and add in here your status information. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got our item property here. Let's go ahead and adjust this. And we're going to change this up. And all we need to do is add an if statement. So we say if is user admin. And this will be the admin option here. And then we add a comma here. And this will be the option for when it's not an admin. And then we just close out the function. And you can see here that we're good. The format text works. Now, what do we want the admin to see that's a little bit different here? We'll just copy this one here and paste it on there. And instead of attachments, we're going to say status. And we're going to say status updates. And now what we can do is we have a status update option. And if we go ahead and click this, everything goes away. So let's go ahead and select our form. And then we'll take a look at our edit fields here. And then we're going to add our status. And we can see now that we can edit this. Now let's go ahead and adjust our visibility here. So we select our visibility, and then we can go ahead and set this to gal select area dot selected dot visible equals status. And then when we select status, that's going to be visible to us. Now for our form mode, we'll need to adjust this also, because if we're coming in here as an admin, we're going to be wanting to edit this. So let's go ahead and use this as kind of a start point, but we're going to switch this up, and we're going to go with a switch function. We'll go with GBL form mode, and we'll do intake. And if it's intake, we're going to want our form mode.new. And then if it's edit, we're going to want our form mode.edit. And if it's none of those, then we want form mode.view. And we'll go ahead and close that out. And we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and delete this because we don't need that anymore. And let's go ahead and close this. And we'll close that out. And let's go ahead and hit the back button here. Now, when we select this, we want to set this also. So we'll go ahead, if is user admin set GBL form mode edit, and we'll add a parentheses there, and then we'll just close out the entire function, and we're ready. So now we're an admin, so when we select this, we're going to be able to edit this form. So we can go to all the different screens here, and we can actually edit the form should we need to change the status inside of the tool instead of inside of the SharePoint list. Now we also need to look at our buttons here because we also want our buttons to be visible. And what we're going to do here is kind of the same thing. So we'll go ahead and click this like this so we can add our switch statement. So we'll say switch GBL form mode, comma, and then our intake will be true, and our edit will be true, and everything else is false. And let's go ahead and copy this. So we've got our save. Let's do our cancel also. And we'll just paste over the top of this. So now we can see all the buttons when we come in here. And again, we can hit the back button here to go back to our main page. Now, one other thing we need to do is take a look at our gallery. So let's look at our items permissions here. And right now we're filtering it. So we want to change this. Let's go ahead and adjust this here. And we're basically going to do kind of the same thing that we've been doing. So we'll add an if, and we'll say is user admin. And we'll go ahead and add some notes in here. So this is going to be our admin view to see everything. And we're going to go ahead and add a comma here. And we're just going to copy this and paste. And then we're going to close it out. And this will be our logged in user view. And all we're going to do is remove our filter just like that. So now we see everything if we're an admin. And a user that comes in is only going to see their items. All right, let's go ahead and move this all the way up to the top there so we can see it a little bit better. So we now can maintain our admins inside the system. I did want to adjust this. So let's go ahead and change our template size to 50. And that is about the same size as our button here. So it just condenses it a little bit more. You might have a lot of users in here, so you don't want to use up more space than you have to. And a lot of times, actually, I would decrease the height of this, and I would actually make this a little bit smaller. That way you can kind of pack it in there. But now you can fit a whole bunch of different roles in here, and you can compress this down a little bit and give yourself even more room. Now, you might run into a situation where when you select this and you make this bigger, all of a sudden you don't have enough room here. And what you can do is you can conditionally make these buttons and these headers invisible so that it doesn't collapse in on itself essentially as you're going through that. So there are a lot of different kind of things you can do here if you've got a whole bunch of different user roles that you need to display on here, where you can kind of compress this down so they don't see that. Or you could also put as a form you could also put the form in a pop-up. That way you could adjust it over the top of it and not have to worry about doing any of these adjustments in the background, and then just close the form out. So that's another approach you could do with this. All right, so the last thing that we need to do is the toggles. We don't actually want them to be able to toggle these. So what we need to do is put something over it to block it. And a rectangle is great for this. So all we do is move this over here and cover up our toggles. And then all we're gonna do for our color is set this to RGBA 000, and there we go. Now we've got blank and we've got no border. So if we look at this, now we can no longer click this. So if I hit the play button here, I can't click it. If I hadn't put that over there, I would have been able to click this and toggle it, but I don't have a way to save it. So the user thinks that they're making changes, but they're not actually making changes here. So that's kind of the last thing you want to do. If you want to use toggles, and again, you don't have to use toggles. I just like the look of them. So that's why I tend to use these a little bit on these galleries. I think they look pretty good. You also don't need to have the label on there. So if you just want to have the toggle as your visual indicator, you don't need the yes, no on there. So all those things are adjustable as well, depending on what you're looking for. And it does save a little bit of space if you get rid of the yes, no on the design. All right, that's pretty much it for today's video. Hopefully you found the content helpful. Until next time.